Okay, so today we're going to do something very different from the usual, oh, here's the top 10 most anticipated blah, blah, blah. No, that's boring. Let's be original here and instead do something really stupid, but entertaining. Instead, we're going to go over 30 games that I've read the manual for and watched a few playthroughs for to get the best sense I can to predict where the game will end up on my end of the year ranking video for 2025. Yes, you heard that right. A preemptive tier ranking of upcoming 2025 games. Yeah, I know that's silly, but tier ranking is fun, and I think trying to make predictions just adds to the entertainment because I can compare them at the end of the year and just see how I did. So whoever can get upset in the comment section over the games they're hyped for that I think look bad and laugh at me when I get it wrong at the end of the year and end up liking it too. Everybody wins. But really, it's just a fun way to shed some light on some new games, for good or for bad. That being said, this isn't a deep dive. We'll be going over these games relatively quickly, so let's get started. So to start this clairvoyant tier ranking video, we have Deep Regrets. Deep Regrets is a cooperative push-your-luck fishing game where you pull progressively scarier things from the depths of the ocean, decide what to eat, sell, mount, and how many regrets you're willing to carry as you push further and further down into the abyss. The game just looks pretty cool and has a unique theme. At least in the board game space. The theme and concept is obviously taken straight from the game Dredge, currently available on Steam and is awesome, so you should go check that out. I'm all for a push your luck competitive experience, and this game does provide a variety of ways to mitigate your rolls, which is always a bonus. And I do like the way the game decides to punish pushing too hard through the use of madness. It's thematically on point, and the hidden factor of those regret cards that you earn along the way allow for a little mystery and tension. The game does seem to be trying to do its best to tell a story through its cards and the narrative play, but at some point I'm worried that I'm not going to care what the story is anymore, and I'm just going to see those numbers on cards and not really care about anything else. And that's the unfortunate result of a lot of these narrative-driven games. In addition, it's 30 minutes per player, and it looks like to be a fairly light game, which indicates to me that this is the type of game where I'd be left feeling like it's overstaying its welcome. So I have a funny feeling I wouldn't play this with more than one other player, and even then, I'm not sure this game warrants an hour. We shall see. For now, I predict this game will reside in the B territory. Next, we have the upcoming Finspan, which is set in the Wingspan cinematic universe. In Finspan, players take on the role of marine researchers seeking to find and observe an array of aquatic life. Wait, what is this? Is this Wingspan with fish? Is this a meme from Reddit? Stop it. Get some help. Wingspan is a good game, and you're milking into a dried husk. No more Wingspan derivatives, Stonemaier Games. You've done enough, okay? It's time to move on. Now, if you think that's too cruel, allow me to offer some other suggestions for Stonemaier Games as a way of saying, I'm sorry. The next game we're excited to release is Lifespan. Collect humans who live their natural life while pumping out babies in the form of cute little baby meeples. And if that doesn't tickle your fancy, how about Spam Span? You collect different types of spam, all while building up various chaining gut reactions like upset stomach and diarrhea. And finally, we have Kink Span. You get the idea. I predict a big ol' C in Finspan's future primarily because I've grown out of favor with Wingspan over the years, and I don't think a lighter version of that is what I'm craving. But hey, maybe I will like the 16th Wingspan derivative Stonemaier makes in 2038, after they make the official company name announcement to change it to Spanmaier Games. But the great thing is, you don't even have to change the logo. It's perfect. And next up, we have the game that's sure to be the greatest board game in all of human history, Sweetlands. This video is sponsored by Sweetlands. Sweetlands is a heavy card-driven action selection game with too many wooden tokens that sees players building an amazing candy city by gathering the support of townsfolk, all in an effort to create the richest and sweetest city. I do really like the theme of this game, and of course I like the art. It helps that it looks like a very heavy game as well, which is always something myself and Kim gravitate toward, and the integration of hand management and city building certainly has my interests. Although we should approach with caution here because it also looks like a mess of stuff, which is fine so long as that mess of stuff is fun. But ultimately, we're looking at yet another low interaction, high playtime Euro. And that's fine sometimes, but if a game is going to make me put my nose down on my own board and ignore everyone else at the table, you better make sure you give me a really good puzzle to solve. I'll probably have to give this game a B. That's what I'm thinking it'll be at the end of the year. It looks interesting, but nothing truly impressive. But you know what? I actually hope I'm wrong here. I hope that I end up loving it. Next, we have the game I could easily just play on Tabletopia right now, but I won't because that's cheating. Speakeasy. In this worker placement, area control hand management game, you take on the role of a mobster, managing and operating your speakeasy empire in Manhattan, improving your operations, upgrading your casinos and speakeasies, and just doing your best to become infamous. This one is feeling like a return to form for Lacerda, where you have a somewhat heavy Euro game that does its best to incorporate its theme into the mechanics to make actions and rules a bit more intuitive and a bit more interesting. Plus, after reading the rules, it does seem that this is a bit more toned down in complexity than some of his most recent games, which I think in this case is good. Because sometimes getting his games to the table after a long break in between can be really, really daunting. This game employs a few semi-cooperative mechanics, which I also love, through the team up and combined strength to attack rum runners action at the ship locations on the board to seal the booze in the crates, and the crates which provide the function of persistent player powers. Again, that's also something that I really love. Going over the rules though, it doesn't seem like you can mess with your opponent's mobsters that much, which is unfortunate given the theme. But you know, that level of confrontation is never in a Lacerda game anyway, sadly. And I'm excited to see how Lacerda does card hand management, which isn't found in a lot of his games aside from Kanban. I'm gonna have to give this one my first S of the day. I really hope I love it. It's on Tabletopia now, so if you know how to play this game, hit me up and teach me, because I really want to try it out. Next is a theme we'll all eventually relate to in this economy: building a home out of garbage in Scarber. In Scarber, players take on the role of farmers and hunters trying to build a thriving community. You'll gather resources to feed and shelter your settlers by drafting cards and using your workers to cook, clean, and craft, all in an effort to have the most points by the end of the 4th round. This is a game of resource management to the absolute extreme. I don't know if you've looked online and seen all the wooden little resource cubes that are in this. It's ridiculous. I think there's like 16 types of resources. On every turn, you draft a card and place a worker, which should make every turn feel rewarding, because when you place your card under the tile on your board, you get the resources on the card based on the accumulated number of symbols in that section. So if you get a bunch, you can see how this will be like really crazy as you go on. My hesitation with the game is the fact that the game isn't trying to hide that it's a resource-centric game. In that you do something to get a resource, to get a resource somewhere else, and just so on forever. And the problem is that it doesn't seem to have that clever hook for a resource game like, let's say, Black Forest with its moving dial. And that's really unfortunate. This kind of looks like Shem's middleweight games, and I'm a much bigger fan of his heavier stuff. I would like to be pleasantly surprised with this, but I have a funny feeling it's going to end up as a C. Up next, we have Galactic Cruise. In Galactic Cruise, you're running a vacation spot in space and doing your best to entertain guests, build ships, increase the company network, and outdo the competition to increase galactic profits and become the new space CEO. This game's design easily screams early Lacerda games, and I'm not just saying that because Ian O'Toole is the illustrator. The game seems very procedural in a good way, featuring a lot of cool worker placement mechanics and the neat subtle ways to interact with other players, like the bump out mechanic for your workers, where if someone replaces your worker, you get a bonus, just like in the Gallerist. Plus, you can place little development tokens between the worker placement spots to take stronger actions, which had some more flexibility and I think a bit more player agency. And the game even employs my favorite worker placement mechanic, which is varying powers on the workers themselves. My only fear is that going over the rules of this game, I can already tell it's going to run longer than advertised. But, regardless, I'm pretty excited for this one, and I do kind of predict an easy A, but we shall see. Next is an absolutely beautiful game, Luthier. Luthier is a worker placement game where players take on the role of a craftsman to create musical instruments while courting historical patrons through their ever-changing personal tableau of actions and bonuses. I think this one is also available in Tabletopia, so hit me up and teach me, people. Teach me. The cool thing about this game is definitely the hidden worker mechanic, where you place your worker disc with a number on it and the main board face down, and then each stack in each worker placement spot gets resolved in order from highest getting to pick first. Sort of reminds me of Francis Drake, if you're familiar with that game. Just seems like a really neat way to add more tension to the worker placement genre beyond, wondering if someone will just take the spot that I might want to take. And that's further emphasized by the public goals that everyone is competing for. These types of things, I think, encourage player interaction so well because it sort of incentivizes me to really get in the heads of other players. And I sort of enjoy that process. I think I'm predicting an A on this one. I think this will be an A. Next is a game you're going to feel you've likely played before, Ilad. Ilad is a tile placement game where players place their tile adjacent to their opponent's tile, using their strength and special abilities to get the most strength in a column and win the success tokens to obtain victory. I do appreciate that the game adds a bit more depth to the usual, tug-of-war style game by providing powers on the tiles themselves, beyond those typical games, which is way more options on any given turn, because the amount of locations you can place a tile to fight over is much higher here, which I could see making for some really sort of beautiful, agonizing decisions where I'm deciding like, okay, well, what's the perfect move? I think this is really looking like one of Knizia's more pleasant two-player games. Nothing about this game seems particularly special per se, but I have a funny feeling Kim and I will probably have a pretty good time with this. So I'm going to predict a B. Next is every content creator's favorite game to gush over, Flow. In Flow, players control an explorer traversing dangerous icy landscapes for treasure and battling monsters. During the game, you'll gain helpful allies, abilities, and rare items, all to become the boldest explorer of all time in what is looking like a game that is going to completely obliterate my table. I'm fairly interested in this game because I do like the idea of a competitive exploration and adventure game where I'm also sort of incentivized to do things like construct buildings and, gain more unique player powers. Unfortunately, though, the game does look relatively sparse and light for my tastes, and going through the rules and, watching playthroughs, I'm not seeing a lot of interesting choices to be made on any given turn. It looks very sandboxy, but not in a particularly good way. I'm also not a big legacy gamer, and the whole, unlock envelope system doesn't look particularly interesting to me. I'm guessing this will be, I'm going to guess this is going to be a C. A pleasant game to play once, but not something that I want to play over and over again. And now we have another Knizia game, Ichor, because you can't get 700 games designed if you're not pumping out multiple games a year. Ichor is an asymmetric strategy game for two players battling as either Greek gods or monsters, moving your pieces around in a straight line and leaving behind a trail of tokens, all to get as many of your tokens on the board as possible and win the game. In Ichor, you have two sides, like checkers. All the pieces move identically by sliding orthogonally down the board until it hits the edge of the board or another player piece. And what you're doing is sort of dropping a counter from the location you leave until you've placed all of them, but your opponent can replace your counters with his counters. Almost like you're creating this cool painting. And of course, each side has special powers they can use to amp up the depth of strategy. This looks like a pretty clever and good abstract game. I'm predicting this will probably be a B. Now we have the latest Mind Clash release, so it's obviously an automatic S, Revenant. In Revenant, players play as one of the last admirals doing their best to lead the surviving fleet through dangerous space, navigating external threats and internal alliances, all in an effort to find a new home. It should come as no surprise that I'm kind of a Mind Clash fanboy, I guess. Most of their games are in my top 100. We didn't get the chance to demo this at PAX, and I'm kind of kicking myself for that because it was always there, but there were always people there. It's essentially a worker placement game with tableau building and shifting alliances, and honestly, that just sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. And the game looks like it has a lot of depth and theme. I'm giving this one a predicted A, but I'm also, like I said, I'm pretty heavily biased. Did you want another game with annoyingly cute animals? Well, you got it, in Ember Leaf. In Ember Leaf, players use their personal deck of woodland creatures, all with varying skills, to rebuild their community by placing cards down on their board, moving their adventure around the environment, and constructing helpful buildings. Obviously, we have to focus on what the game is coining as card dancing mechanic, where you pick an animal, you slide all your previously played cards one to the left, which causes the cards to sort of drop off a grid and come back to your hand. Like this sort of interesting conveyor belt of obnoxious cuteness. It's basically like a free recall action. I do like that it seems to add another dimension of depth to what would otherwise be another engine builder card game, and I am curious to see if it's enjoyable. It also employs buildings and heroes that provide abilities. The rules look well done, and the mechanics, they seem pretty sound. I predict this to be a B. I don't think this is going to be something that blows me away, but I think it's going to be good enough to have some fun with. Oh hey, it's another Civilization game. Nova Era. Nova Era is a card-based city and civilization builder where players guide their civilization through the ages, harnessing powerful technologies, expanding their territories, enlisting historical personalities, all while facing constant threats from the rival nations, disasters, and ever-looming dark ages. I am a sucker for a civilization game, and so they always pique my interest when one is announced. And this one has given me a sort of Mosaic vibe, where you just have this sea of cards on the table, although here it's more dice drafting and placement to perform actions, and the end game and round state are player controlled instead of, randomly determined like in Mosaic. Plus, unlike Mosaic, you can screw with other players a bit more impactfully. Like you can use military cards like artillery or something to damage other players if they didn't plan their defenses properly, which is great because I think in these types of games, in a civilization game, you kind of need some interaction. And listen, if you can give me a good civilization feeling in under 90 minutes, I'm sold. I'm kind of looking forward to this one, and I see a bright old A in this game's future, I hope. Ever wanted to really feel like you're playing with toys while playing a board game? Well, now you can in Mutagen. Mutagen is a worker placement game set in 1920s biopunk world where players race to control the resources known as the Great Shards, which allows the workers of this world to biogenetically transform, all to collect elements to improve your airship, complete your tree cards, and increase their reputation. So every round you start by drafting a biological upgrade and then adding it to your worker to provide them a unique power. A customizable worker placement game is pretty interesting, and the customization is of my choosing, which I always prefer in games. Yes, adding the little, squid arm or whatever to your worker is a little gimmicky, but I'd much rather see, designers try new things than go with what is safe. So I'm going to be positive about this one, and I expect a solid B in this game's future. I am looking forward to this one, and I hope it's really good. Now get ready to give me hell in the comment section because the next game is Spooktacular. Spooktacular sees players playing as crazy monsters springing to life from the movie screen to frighten and devour moviegoers using their variable player powers. Play as one of the 20 unique monsters, all with their own way to play, all in a race to become the most terrifying monster villain of all time. I know I had a lot of lighter games in my top 10 of 2024, but I'm not a lighter gamer, and this game feels really, really light in the wrong way. After pouring through the immense, 8-page rulebook, I'm really not seeing much of anything interesting here. You play a card and either push meeples out of a room or take them to your personal supply for set collection because you've ate them. And then that's essentially it. With the added twist that you can use your monster powers, which seem to be a bit, in my opinion, lacking in individuality and interest. I love the theme, I really do, but theme isn't enough to keep me invested, and the options here on any given turn look very sparse. And for that, I'm giving it a big old D. I hope I'm proving wrong. I'm hoping it's like a blast. I'll probably play at a convention, but for now, it's a D. Next, we have Hegemonic's follow-up to one of the best games of 2024, World Order. World Order is an area-controlled deck-building game where players play as global powers using their diplomatic power, economic strength, and military might to expand their influence across the globe. We are, of course, huge fans of Hegemony. We did one of the very few glowing reviews on this channel for that game, so if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. It's very rare that you see us just gush and be positive all the time. This is yet another heavily asymmetric game. However, this one I think looks a lot more accessible than Hegemony. Since at its heart, it's an area control game, and what's cool is that the game has this dual influence track, one permanent and the other temporary, where you have to maneuver your cubes for control of a region and make the important decision as to whether you want short-term gains or sort of long-term power. It's an interesting distinction between this and, let's say, other area control games. Plus, it has unique powers, obviously, and because it's asymmetric, and the area control itself is more subtle and less direct. It's not as much conflict, stressing the importance of sort of influence and good card play. It's looking pretty interesting so far, but this game really also looks very long. Probably, I'd wager about 3 hours. I think that's what they say on the box. And looking through the rules, I'm not sure there's enough here to justify that playtime to some extent. But I'm looking forward to seeing if I'm wrong. I'm giving this a hesitant C, but sort of my gut is screaming B. But I'm going to be realistic and say it's probably going to end up being a C. And next we have the upcoming game, Roth. Roth is an asymmetric area control game where players draft action dice to gain resources, deploy and move troops, and attack their opponents, all while trying to hold key positions and dominate various regions. Dice drafting, beat 'em up, that sort of reminds me of the brutal King of the Hill style of Nexus Ops. Seems pretty fun to me, and I appreciate that the game looks very streamlined with not a lot of mechanical bloat that you tend to get in a contemporary game design. This is like a light drafting area control game, and that's kind of it. Kim won't appreciate this, but this is the style of game I bust out with the boys for, a nice in-between bigger game style stress reliever. I'm looking forward to this one, and I think I'm predicting an A. I'm predicting an A. I think it'll be really good. Next, we have the game that every content creator under the sun told you to back or you'd miss out and you would absolutely die of regret. Grim Kovin. Grim Kovin is yet another miniature boss battler where you take on the role of a hunter with their own unique powers and upgrades to build and exercise unique combos to fight various big baddies across a variety of different arenas using a combat system focused on strategic dice allocation. I hate boss battlers. All of them play as if the designers are not aware of tabletop war games. You know, because they're always they feel so stripped down of tactics and creativity in their design. They seem to exist just to sell you buckets and buckets of overly designed and poorly sculpted miniatures through Kickstarter. I do appreciate that this one looks a little different and the movement goes a bit beyond, you know, I'm sidestepping to the right or sidestepping to the left, and instead has characters and monsters, including minions, which is kind of cool, moving across a larger hex-based map. And the game incorporates terrain, which is also nice, but by the looks of it, it looks pretty basic. I also really like the way they're trying to incorporate push your luck through flipping your character card over to become stronger. But that, of course, means that they're getting closer to death. Reminds me sort of Marvel Crisis Protocol, but I'm predicting that this will be the second boss battler I mildly enjoy next to Primal. Although this one looks really long, so we'll see. I'm going to predict a very mid C tier. Oh, what's this? It's another bloated Kickstarter game. It's Lands of Evershade, everybody. Lands of Evershade is an RPG and board game without a dungeon master where players build their characters like an RPG and then engage with the world through multiple standalone story modules and, of course, battles. The combat system in this game seems more basic from what I read than even dungeon crawlers and boss battlers, which are already pretty basic. And if the combat system isn't very good, what am I doing here? You know, like, why would I play a stripped down RPG? I don't think this is the game that's made for me. And, you know, you create a whole new world and your world is like bland fantasy that looks like every other fantasy setting. There are RPGs with combat systems that are fairly competent. Just play those instead. Like, unfortunately, this game's role-playing is sort of just like, if you ever played Tales of Arabian Nights, where, you read from a book and decide if you want to say A or B to the non-player character, and then, turn to the appropriate page. Listen, I loved Choose Your Own Adventure books as much as the next kid, but, this isn't the Scholastic Book Fair, and I don't care anymore. I'm predicting a contentious D, where I poop on this game at the end of the year and then get a few people defending it and calling me silly. Time shall tell. But feel free to get into the comment section right now and let me know how wrong I am and how, putting in $300 or whatever you put into the game was a very smart decision and it's going to be the best game of all time. Just let me know. And next up is Yield. In Yield, leaders of the 5 most powerful houses gather their armies using their asymmetric powers in an attempt to extend their realm. Players will engage in a furious battle across a tactical map by selecting action cards from their hands to recruit units and conquer fortresses, all to create the most powerful dynasty in history. So you use your dials for each army you control and secretly allocating, their strength, so nobody really knows how strong the enemy is until battle actually occurs, which sort of makes movement sort of feel like you're playing Stratego. But once an army's strength is revealed, well, now players can start using deduction about the other armies, which is neat. It just looks like a fairly interesting abstract lighter war game with a really clever twist on an otherwise, sometimes boring area majority style game. I do have some hesitation here, but I'm gonna give it an A. I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm looking forward. Next, we have yet another board game based on Cyberpunk 2077, but this one has the board game attached to it. So it's a board game. Cyberpunk is a cooperative real-time card game where each player controls an edge runner, fighting around the city, completing missions, and just generally doing their best to complete the main objectives together to win the game. So this is another one of those games where, I'm being told by content creators that it's the greatest thing in the universe. And, you have to trust those statements because they have absolutely nothing to do with the video, of course, themselves being sponsored. We love Escape at our house, and everything about this game is suggesting the game Escape through its, intense timer mechanics, anxiety-inducing soundtrack, and the breather period for strategizing. Although the strategizing in this game is much more than discussing where you're going to go next. Here, you're upgrading your character to just kind of do more stuff. But unlike Escape, this game looks like it has a lot more icons and just like random crap to fiddle and fumble around with, which can really inhibit a real-time game. Regardless, I am looking forward to this one, so I'm going to give it a B. Although, let's face it, the only good thing to ever come from this franchise is the Edge Runner anime, which everyone should watch because it's freaking amazing. And up next, we have another charming tile laying game to add to your collection, Railroad Tiles. In Railroad Tiles, you'll draft tiles from the main area and then place them into your personal area to build your own network and city, making as many connections as possible. You'll also be placing trains, cars, and travelers to populate your cute little landscape, all to get as many points as possible and win the game. This is a tile placement game that is the spiritual successor to Railroad Inc., which I actually haven't played, so I'm coming in pretty fresh here. I really only have so much room in my collection for, sort of chill, laid-back tile placement games, and nothing about this game seems interesting enough to warrant it being a very good candidate for a place in that collection. I am generally seeing a C in this game's future, probably something I play in Board Game Arena once and then just completely figure out about it. And now we have a very pretty game, Huton, Life in the Rainforest. Huton is a card drafting tile placement family game where players select a card with flowers and then plant those flowers to grow trees and create their own patch of the rainforest, doing their best to entice forest animals to arrive. So yet another cute little game where I'm just sort of moving and matching colors to attract tokens, but here they're animals of the same color for victory points. I believe this is the only game on this list I couldn't watch a full playthrough through or, read a rulebook for, so I'm basing this entirely on the information provided by the publisher. I know it's a family game, and that means it's going to be light, but it looks like every turn I take will be kind of totally obvious, which kind of makes the game, to me, very, very boring. I predict this is a game that will pop up on BGA, I'll play it once, and never want to play it again. I'm going to say a D. Next, we have a game developed by a content creator here on YouTube, Shadow Moon Syndicate. In Shadow Moon Syndicates, players take on the role of a crime boss, playing their hand of cards to influence regions, carry out crimes, and assemble teams of specialists, all to get the most credits by the end of the game. There's a good amount of area control games on this list, a game type that I often find myself getting pretty bored of quickly. But this one does seem to have enough twists to pique my interest through its use of card play, where players can sort of manipulate the cards of their opponents, swapping the topmost card between players, or putting something from the deck into another player's pile. I love a little take that here and there. There just seems to be a lot of opportunities for interaction from what I can read in the manual, straightforward rules and what's looking to be a good, simple game with a decent amount of depth. I'm pretty optimistic about this game, and I predict a pretty solid B. And next up, we have Tend. Tend is a flip and write game where players are pioneers starting a homestead on an alien world, building up their farm and collecting goods, using the same deck of action cards and simultaneously taking those actions on their own sheets. They'll do all this to collect badges, be the best star neighbor around, and get the most victory points. I couldn't for the life of me get my hands on a digital copy of the manual, which, in my opinion, is usually never a good sign. So this is based on watching playthroughs. And from those playthroughs, this is looking like a run-of-the-mill flip and write game, but now you get to scratch stuff? Wow. But you also get to gift a resource card to your neighbors to your left and your right, which admittedly sounds interesting and pretty damn wholesome, which I think should add another strategic layer, which is, again, mildly interesting. But it does look like I'm sitting through a game with very mild player interaction and a relatively basic puzzle. That doesn't really interest me. I'm thinking this game is going to be one I get bored of relatively quickly, and for that, I'm going to give it a C, even though I think Kim will enjoy this and she'll probably make me play it. So, next we have what I'm hoping for is a replacement for The Crew, The Fellowship of the Ring, a trick-taking game. The Fellowship of the Ring is a cooperative card game where players are led through a series of events from the novel, and in each chapter, players take on a different character, trying their best to meet their unique conditions by playing tricks with cards. I believe this game is being sent to us, which is funny because I do remember telling the publisher when they contacted us that I just hated trick-taking games. I hated them. But they said they'd send it anyway. So I mean, hats off to them then. That's pretty impressive. But the reason I decided to say yes is because I really do like The Crew. And this one seems a lot like that game, but with a persistent story and individual player powers based on the character from the books. I really hope this game is fun. I hope it's quick. Because if it is, I definitely see an A in this game's future. I really do. It seems like a really good filler game to play with friends between games. And next up, we have DNA, the New Origin of Species. In DNA, players take on the role of a scientist populating a distant planet with diverse creatures. Complete DNA sequences to bring new species to life, place them on modular regions to score points, and unlock new powerful effects from the created life forms to score even more points. This looks like a pretty fun little puzzle where you're drawing these tokens from a bag and then drafting the animal species card to place those tokens on it to fill and populate that species, almost like a sort of lighter version of Harmonies. The creatures themselves have their own abilities, which looks like they make things a bit more interesting, and I can see there being a good amount to think about on any given turn, despite it being a relatively simple game. Sadly, there's not a lot of info on this game, so I'm just using the tutorial video. Regardless, it looks enjoyable, and I'm predicting a B. Next, we have Madala. Madala is a 2-player asymmetric abstract game that takes the element of Madala and pits players against one another. Players must outthink and outmaneuver their opponents by picking a plate of shards and leaving them on each plate they pass. Whatever plate they end up on will give them an action to perform. It looks pretty darn clever, I have to say. You know, like I like that you can manipulate your opponent's side of the table by sort of messing up with their own personal Madala. You also get your own cards, which sort of act as guests that provide various abilities that make you entirely unique from your opponent. I did say earlier that this seems like asymmetric play is sort of just all the rage these days. And, you know, honestly, I'm kind of all for it. I'd like to see this trend in board gaming right now. In general, it just looks like a fun, super quick to play, interesting little puzzle that Kim is going to hate because it also looks really mean. And I'm just gonna enjoy. So I'm expecting an A from this one for a game that I really want to play, but she'll never want to play with me. Next is a game about wine purchasing, and not just wine making. Wine Cellar. Wine Cellar is an auction game that sees players facing off as rival wine tasters by taking a client, building a cellar that ages wine for the client's taste, and receiving points based on meeting their client's preferences. Now, all those bottles you're putting into your personal supply have an ideal position in your cellar, and so you have to create this sort of like perfect order and win those bids to complete your client's orders. So a lot of this game seems to rest on tactically determining the final placement of your bottles by the end of the game, because as the game goes on, your bottles sort of move and shift as you're getting new bottles. So you're not in full control, and so sometimes you might have to make, you know, quick on-the-fly tactical decisions to adapt. And that sounds like a good decision space and a game that goes beyond simply like finishing a set, which is refreshing for a bidding game. Most bidding games are kind of like that. It's looking like a pretty good lightweight bidding game that I can play in between bigger games with a lot of people, and I think that's a really good position to be in. I predict a pretty pleasant B. And next is the alleged replacement for Hadrian's Wall, the Anarchy. The Anarchy is a multi-use card game where players build their own domain, defend their castles from attacks, storm strongholds, and accumulate the most bravery and loyalty possible, all to prove how good of an ally they are to the king. So like Hadrian's Wall, you'll be spending lots of colorful workers to perform the various actions, which all sort of feel like their own mini games. But here it looks a lot more complex than Hadrian's Wall, and I'm not sure if that's in a good way. But the main issue here is that the game is looking like it's trying to replace Hadrian's Wall, and you know, that's fine, but I don't know if that's something I want. I don't know if I want to get rid of my copy to play this one, or if this one is significantly better. I'm going over the rules and stuff and watching a playthrough. But you know, I'm going to bet an A on this game simply because it's sort of resting on the shoulders of what is a really good game. And that about wraps it up for this mix of anticipated and dreaded upcoming games of 2025. We are at a size now where we get a lot of offers to promote Kickstarter games, and you know, with that promotion comes sometimes cold hard cash. Now, we have said no to all of them because Kim and I haven't really established yet what the best ethical approach should be. And like, I hate the constant hype Kickstarter games seem to get. But at the same time, I do back them from time to time. And I kind of want to accept a game knowing I'll dislike it just to completely crap all over it and just set a precedent, you know? Nope, so people know we're not messing around. But that's probably not a good idea. Kim has said that's a very, very bad idea. I say all that simply to state that this video was not endorsement of any of these games if they are currently on Kickstarter. Unless the company is one that you really, really trust and has produced countless games on time and that have been awesome, never back a project, and always wait for retail. In fact, don't back any of these games, because I promise you the ones that end up being awesome will absolutely hit retail shelves. Wait for that, because the constant advertising it'll be over. You know, the shilling will be done. And if people are still talking about it at that time, then maybe truly it is a really good game. And looking over my list, I see like one S and just a sea of warm Bs and mediocre Cs. I hope I'm wrong about this year, or that there are some like unannounced surprise hits in waiting. Otherwise, I don't know if this will be a particularly good year for gaming, at least for me. Oh, wait, sorry, I just forgot that I'm a content creator. Let me just rephrase what I just said. This is going to be the greatest year in existence. Buy every game I mentioned, back every Kickstarter, sell your wife, sell your kids, you do whatever you have to do to get the money and buy more games. And don't forget to smash that like button and give me your money. Goodbye.